promise me you'll never open the box under my bed. That was the last thing my mother said to me before she died. Not, I love you. Not, you'll be okay. Just that one, strange, trembling plea. Don't open the box. And I promised her I wouldn't. At the time, it felt sacred. Like keeping that box closed would somehow preserve her final breath. Like it would keep her with me, even after she was gone. But grief has a way of changing shape over time, mutating. And so does trust. My name is Kayla Madsen, and this is the story of how one promise shattered everything I thought I knew about my mother, about my marriage, and about the lies that can survive long after a funeral. My mom, Judith Carson, had always been the kind of woman people turned to. She was composed, thoughtful, the kind of mother who always made a second plate even if you said you weren't hungry. After my dad died when I was 12, it was just the two of us. And she carried the weight of that without complaint. But there were cracks I didn't notice until later. Like the way she'd freeze when I told her Drew raised his voice. Or how she'd change the subject when I said I wasn't sure if I was ready to marry him. You'll settle in, she'd say. Marriage is an adjustment. What I didn't realize then was that she wasn't giving advice. She was managing a secret. The box itself was nothing special. Just a small, faded tin with chipped floral paint and a cheap padlock pushed all the way to the back under her bed. I first saw it when I was 16, helping her clean after her second knee surgery. When I asked what was inside, she snapped at me in a tone I'd never heard before. Don't touch that. It startled me so much I never brought it up again. Still, it stuck with me. Like a riddle that sat in the corners of my brain, waiting. By the time Mom's health really started to decline, I was married and living just a few blocks away. Drew and I were complicated. Outwardly, we looked like the perfect couple. He was charming, successful, attentive in public. But at home, there were rules. Unspoken ones. Don't contradict him in front of others. Don't ask questions when he gets home late. Don't cry. He hated when I cried. He never hit me. But that's the thing no one tells you about emotional abuse. It doesn't leave bruises on the skin. It makes you question your memory, your worth, your very voice. I remember telling my mother about the first time Drew shoved me. I had been standing in the doorway during an argument. He pushed past me, and I fell. Nothing serious. Just a bruised shoulder. But it scared me. I think he's under stress, I told her on the phone, barely above a whisper. But it felt wrong. She was silent for a long time, then said, Kayla, marriage isn't perfect. Sometimes people lash out. Just don't escalate it. I felt like I'd failed some secret test of womanhood. So I stopped mentioning the bad days. When her cancer came back, it was aggressive. Fast. She moved into a hospice suite at home, and I became her primary caretaker. It should have brought us closer, but it only made the silences heavier. And then, one night, near the end, she took my hand and whispered that final plea. Don't open the box under the bed. Please. Just promise me. Her voice was so fragile, so desperate. I didn't ask why. I just promised. She died 2 days later. In the weeks after her funeral, I barely functioned. I went through the motions, cleaning out her house, meeting with lawyers, paying off the last of her medical bills. I boxed up her clothes and donated most of them, but I left the bedroom mostly untouched. I couldn't bring myself to go near the bed. Not yet. Drew wasn't exactly supportive. He hated when I cried over her, said it was too much, told me to snap out of it. One night, when I was sobbing quietly in the bathroom, he banged on the door and shouted, Jesus, Kayla, some of us have work in the morning. That night, I curled up in the living room and stared at the wedding photo on our mantel. And for the first time in years, I allowed myself to wonder, what if I'd made a mistake? What if love wasn't supposed to feel like constant apology? But it was the night of the first anniversary of Mom's death when everything truly began to unravel. A storm rolled in, one of those southern spring tempests that rattled windows and pulled the past to the surface. I couldn't sleep. Something was gnawing at me from the inside, a mix of grief, guilt, and curiosity. I got up, barefoot, and drove to her old house. I still had a key. The power had been turned off, and the rooms felt hollow, but I knew exactly where to go. I stood in her bedroom, the box still under the bed, exactly where it had always been, covered in dust, as if even time was afraid of it. I hesitated. I remembered her voice. Promise me. But a new voice was louder now, one shaped by bruised silences, one that said, "You deserve to know." So I reached under the bed and broke the promise. The box was cold, dusty, lighter than I expected. I sat on the edge of the bed, her bed, and stared at it for a long time. The rain outside was pounding the windows, as if the storm itself knew what I was about to uncover. I hesitated, heart hammering in my chest. Somewhere deep inside, a part of me hoped it would be nothing. Maybe just old bills, forgotten photos, or some private keepsake from her younger years. But the key was there, taped behind the frame of our old beach photo. The one where I was 10 and missing a front tooth, smiling into the sunlight with Mom holding me close, as if she wanted me to find it eventually. I opened the box. Inside were stacks of paper, carefully tied with ribbon, yellowed at the edges. Letters. Dozens of them. Some handwritten, others typed. My name was on many of the envelopes. At first, I thought they were my own. Letters I'd written to her from college, when I'd left home for the first time and found myself tangled in a long-distance relationship with Drew. I remembered how much I used to confide in her, every argument, every anxious doubt, every "I think he's just tired" excuse I wrote back then. She had kept them all. But then there were other letters, ones I had never seen. These weren't from me. They were hers. And they weren't addressed to me. They were to Gloria Lentz, Drew's mother. I frowned and opened the top one, dated July 11th, 2012, around the time I moved back home for the summer before our engagement. Gloria, I'm writing you because I don't know what else to do. Kayla came to me in tears again. She said Drew grabbed her during an argument. Left a mark this time. She says it's not a big deal, but she's clearly scared. My blood turned cold. My eyes darted to the next paragraph. I know you said you talked to him, but this is the third time she's called me like this. She won't listen to me. She defends him. If we don't intervene, I don't know what could happen. I won't report it yet, but I need your help. I dropped the letter like it was on fire. My pulse roared in my ears. My mother knew, not just in vague terms, not through assumptions. She knew he'd been hurting me, and she reached out to his mother about it? I rifled through the stack, hands shaking, heart in my throat. I told the hospital staff it was a fall down the back steps. I lied, Gloria. I lied for them. I don't even know who I'm protecting anymore. August 3rd, 2014. I gasped. That was the night Drew shoved me into the kitchen counter, and I split my forehead open.
He drove me to the ER, told me what to say.
Told me to get it together before they asked questions. I had no idea my mother had been there. I didn't remember seeing her, but her handwriting didn't lie, and neither did the ache forming in my chest. She lied for him. For us. For what? I kept reading, heart breaking open, one letter at a time. Some were practical, listing dates, incidents, damage control. Others were desperate, scribbled on torn paper, her handwriting erratic, emotional. If she finds out I knew, I'll lose her. But if I say nothing, I'm helping bury her alive. That one stopped me cold. I stared at her words until my vision blurred. I tried to imagine what she must have felt, watching her daughter spiral, wanting to intervene, but afraid of being pushed away. Was it fear? Cowardice? Or did she truly think she was doing what was best for me? I didn't know, and I hated that I'd never be able to ask her. Tucked behind the letters was a small envelope labeled in her handwriting. If you ever open this box. My fingers trembled as I unfolded it. Kayla, if you're reading this, then I've broken your heart. And I'm sorry. I didn't know how to protect you without losing you. I thought I was making it easier for you to love him because you loved him more than you loved yourself. And I couldn't bear to lose you twice, once to him and once to the truth. I told myself I was preserving your life. What I was really doing was silencing your pain. Please forgive me, my baby. I failed you in ways I can't fix. But I saved every letter you wrote me. Because I never stopped hearing you. Even when I didn't act on it. She signed it, Mom, with her little heart and flourish like she used to do on lunchbox notes when I was a kid. I sat in that room, alone with the storm and the wreckage of our secrets, and I cried like I hadn't in years. Not the quiet tears I was used to swallowing, but the guttural, trembling sobs of someone who had been betrayed not once, but twice. By the man I married, and by the woman who raised me. The rain stopped sometime before dawn. When I finally looked up, my world felt different. Not clearer, just heavier. I wasn't sure what I'd do next. How do you confront a ghost and a monster at the same time? But one thing was certain. I couldn't go back to pretending. Not anymore. People think rage shows up like fire, hot, explosive, unmistakable. But mine came in cold. It froze me in place, made me quiet, focused. A stillness that scared even me. When I left my mother's house that morning, I didn't go home right away. I sat in the parking lot of a gas station 2 blocks from our neighborhood, watching people go about their lives, pumping gas, sipping coffee, yelling at kids to get back in the car. I used to be one of them. Ordinary. Unaware. Now, I had a box full of betrayal in the trunk and no roadmap for what to do with it. But I knew one thing.
Drew had to know I knew.
He was in the kitchen when I got home, wearing that smug smirk he always wore when he thought he was being charming. He had the nerve to say, "You disappear again and don't text? What am I, a widower?" I looked at him for a long time. Not like a husband, more like a puzzle I had finally solved. And I smiled. A slow, unfamiliar smile that made him blink twice.
"You should sit down," I said. He didn't.
Instead, he leaned on the counter and crossed his arms. "You're being dramatic again. Just tell me what this is about." I took the box from my bag, placed it softly on the table between us. The metal clicked as I opened the lid. "You remember this?" I asked. He peered inside, confused. "What is this? Old mail?" I pulled out one letter and read aloud, voice steady. "Drew grabbed her during an argument. Left a mark this time. She says it's not a big deal, but she's clearly scared." His face went pale. "Where did you get that?" he asked, jaw tightening. "My mother's house," I replied. "She kept every letter I wrote her, every plea I whispered between the lines. And she kept her letters to your mother. Want to guess what's in them?" He stepped back. "You're overreacting. You don't know what you're reading." "I know exactly what I'm reading," I said, eyes locked on his. "I know you hurt me. I know your mother knew. And I know mine did, too." I watched it register. The realization that the lies had caught up, that his version of history, so carefully crafted, was unraveling in my hands.
For a long moment, he said nothing.
Then he laughed. A dry, bitter laugh. "You want to play the victim now? After everything I've given you? You're not some battered wife, Kayla. You're a drama queen with a flair for rewriting the past." There it was. The gaslighting. The twisting. The old playbook. But this time, it didn't work. "You're not going to talk your way out of this," I said quietly. "I'm done." He stared at me like he was seeing me for the first time. Maybe he was. Maybe I was, too. "Done," he repeated. "You think you can just walk away?" "Yes." I reached into my bag and pulled out a manila envelope. "And I already have." Inside were divorce papers.
Signed.
Ready. He didn't touch them. Didn't move. So I stood, pushed the box toward him, and said, "Read every word. Or burn it. I don't care. But we're finished." And then I walked out. But it wasn't over. Not really. Because healing doesn't come neatly. Especially when the people who hurt you are the same ones who said they loved you. The next few weeks were a blur of lawyers, logistics, and layered grief. I stayed with my friend Emily, who offered me her guest room without asking a single invasive question. "Just take the bed. I'll take the couch." I told her everything one night over wine and tissues. She didn't say much. Just sat with me in the quiet. Sometimes that's all you need. But the ache for my mother didn't go away. Because after the shock wore off, the heartbreak came. How could she let it go on? How could she know, really know, and still look me in the eyes like everything was okay? Was it love? Was it fear? Did she think she was helping? I asked those questions out loud one night, staring at the same letter I'd read over and over. The one that ended with, "I'm sorry, my baby. I failed you in ways I can't fix." And maybe that's the point. Maybe she knew she failed. Maybe she couldn't find a way to undo it, but she left the truth behind so I could. That night, I wrote her a letter. I didn't burn it. I didn't mail it anywhere. I folded it and put it back in the tin, next to the others. Because secrets buried us. But truth could resurrect something, even if just for me. 3 weeks later, I got a call. From Gloria, his mother. I didn't know she kept the letters, she said. She told me once that Kayla was in danger. But I didn't believe it. You chose not to, I replied. There was silence. Then, in the most fragile voice I'd ever heard from that woman, "I'm sorry." I didn't say I forgave her. But I didn't hang up either. Some wounds need to bleed before they can scar. I don't live in fear anymore. That version of my life, of myself, doesn't exist. And sometimes, on quiet nights, I still hear my mother's voice saying, "Don't open the box." But I'm glad I did. Because what I found inside didn't just expose what broke me. It helped me put the pieces back together. Healing doesn't come with fanfare. No parades. No flashing signs that say you did it. Sometimes healing looks like folding laundry in silence. Sometimes it's not flinching when someone raises their voice. Sometimes it's just waking up and breathing without guilt. 3 months after I walked out of that house and that marriage, I found myself standing in a courthouse, watching Drew sign the final divorce documents.
He wouldn't look at me.
Part of me wished he would. Another part knew better. Because if he looked me in the eye, I might see the same man who once bought me roses after pushing me into a doorframe, who cried the first time I said I was scared of him, who convinced me that the pain was love, that my silence was strength, and that the world would never believe me if I ever left. But he didn't look up, just signed his name, jaw tight, lips pressed in anger. And that was the end of it, on paper at least. But the reckoning wasn't over. 2 weeks later, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. "Hi, is this Kayla Monroe?" "Yes. This is Detective Lisa Tran with the Domestic Violence Investigations Unit. I believe you submitted a letter collection last month through your attorney."
My heart kicked in my chest. Yes.
I did. I'd like to meet with you in person to discuss the contents. Some of what you submitted indicates potential criminal behavior that was never reported. I sat very still. I hadn't expected anything legal to come of the letters. My lawyer had advised me to submit them to a DV support unit anonymously in case I ever wanted to press charges down the road. I hadn't thought that far ahead. But the universe did. We met at a coffee shop. She wore plain clothes, not the stiff uniform I had imagined. She was soft-spoken, direct, and kind. "Kayla, I read every letter. I believe you," she said. "And I believe your mother tried, in her own misguided way, to document what she couldn't fix." I nodded, eyes burning. "Here's the thing," Lisa continued. "You have options. If you choose to file charges, we have enough to open an investigation. The hospital records match the timeline in the letters. The photos from your ER visit. Statements from your friend Emily. It's not airtight, but it's strong." I stared into my cup. "And what happens if I do press charges?" "He'll be investigated. There may be a trial. It'll be hard. You'll be asked questions you shouldn't have to answer. But you'll be heard. And you won't be alone." The words rang in my ears. You won't be alone. For so long I had been. That night, I took a walk through my old neighborhood, past the house I grew up in. The porch light was out, the windows dark, but I could still see Mom sitting in the rocking chair, humming to herself. I remembered how she'd braid my hair when I was little, how she'd whisper, "You're stronger than you know, baby," when I had bad dreams. And I remembered the day she said, "There's a box under the bed. Don't open it. Not unless you have to." I had to. And I realized that maybe she knew the box wouldn't save me, but it might one day give me back my voice. I pressed charges. The case didn't move quickly. These things never do. Drew denied everything, of course. Said I made it all up. Claimed my mother was mentally unwell before she died and that I had a vendetta. But the evidence chipped away at his lies. Emails between our mothers. Voicemails I'd forgotten I saved. ER records. Photos. I testified. So did Emily. The hardest part wasn't telling the truth. It was facing who I had been. That girl who smiled in public and bruised in private. Who made excuses for pain because she didn't want to be too much. Who mistook endurance for love. I grieved for her. But I was no longer her. And when the verdict came, guilty on 2 counts of felony domestic assault, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt still, like the earth had paused, acknowledged the wound, and begun to close. Afterward, I visited my mother's grave for the first time in months. I brought the letter I'd written her. I wish you'd done more, I whispered, kneeling beside her stone. But I think I finally understand why you didn't. You weren't strong enough back then, but you tried, in the only way you knew how. I placed the folded paper beside her headstone. I found my strength. I used it. And I think, wherever she was, she heard me. Today, I work at a shelter for women like me. Women who don't know how to say it yet. Women who think no one will believe them. Who think love should hurt, or silence equals safety. I tell them what I wish someone had told me. You are not crazy. You are not alone. And you are not broken. You are surviving something you never deserved to endure. The box is still with me. Not hidden. Not under a bed. It sits on my shelf now, unlocked. Not as a wound, but as a witness. And a reminder that sometimes the truth hurts worse than the lie, but it also sets you free. Thank you so much for listening to my story. Your support means everything. If this story touched you or made you think, please subscribe to our channel for more real, powerful stories.